In this DVD, we will break the lake down into quadrants that relate to a boat access ramp to cut your running time down. Haycock Launch. Starting in the north of the lake, we find Haycock Ramp. Good launch for fishing the Haycock Creek and Dam area. Probably the least used launch on the lake, but popular with kayakers due to the level and easy access to the water. 2 boats wide launch and prep area. Ramp is well maintained, constructed of concrete with floating dock for easy access to boat. Adequate parking for cars and trailers, restrooms, picnic tables, and barbecue area, with shoreline fishing opportunities. This ramp features a handicap fishing area with safety railings and seating. Haycock area features that hold fish. Just north of the Haycock Ramp on the west side of the channel, you will find a large shallow weed bed that tapers down into 8 feet of water and extends over 200 yards long and out 20 yards from the bank. This is a transitional staging area for bass to move into the spring spawning ground further north and under the Route 563 bridge. Weeds will be visible in spring through fall. The bass will hold in this area when water temperature reaches 50 degrees or more. Anglers should target this bass cover with spinnerbaits, plastic worms, and in early spring, suspending jerkbaits work extremely well. One disadvantage to this spot is that it is very popular with shoreline anglers and can have a lot of kayak traffic that cuts right through the weed bed. In the spring, the bass will be in and among the weeds. But in the summertime, bass tend to stay on the outside edge, close to deep water and safety. Traveling further north, our next spot is a stretch of riprap along the Route 563 roadway leading to the bridge at 563. This is an excellent springtime spot starting in March. This riprap will trap and hold the early spring sun, warming the surrounding water by as much as 10 degrees and drawing fish close to the shore. Anglers should target their baits as close to the shore and rocks as possible. Some weeds will grow in this area, but the rocks are the real draw for the fish. The bank drops quickly to 20 feet, just a few feet from the shore. A general rule for fishing riprap is to cast parallel to the riprap and let your lure sink right into the rocks. Keeping your lures in the strike zone longer will increase your hookup chances. Under the Route 563 bridge is a popular spot for shoreline anglers. The area north of the bridge is called the Haycock Bay area. This whole bay area is a prime spring spawning ground in the northern part of the lake when water temperatures reach 50 degrees in the middle of March in this bay. Spawning typically takes place in the middle of April or early May. Weeds will be subsurface at this time of year, but when the water temperature reaches 60 degrees, anglers should use topwater baits like a buzz bait over the top of the weeds and pads. This bay's water temperatures will warm faster than the main lake, but it is also susceptible to quick changes due to water and air temperature changes common in the spring. Water clarity will also be affected severely after spring storms. In the southwest corner of the bay, you'll find a long grass and lily pad field that will hold fish starting in early April. Bass will stage in this area in early pre-spawn spring, waiting to move into the nearby shallow cove to spawn in May. Anglers should try a shallow diving crankbait, or when water reaches 50 degrees or more, try a spinnerbait or a suspending jerkbait. Our next spot is a small cove in the western side of the bay. This is a very good staging area in mid-April for pre-spawning bass, with good numbers of 3 to 4 pound female bass stacking up on the outside of the cove waiting for the spawn. Starting in May, the fish will move onto the beds deep in the cove. A small stream feeds the back of the cove and provides a food source. Bass will use the thick weeds and pads as cover from the bright sun. Present your baits parallel and along the edge of the weeds. If your bait gets hung up, simply rip them through the weeds. Sometimes this will trigger fish to strike. In April, the upper Haycock Bay area is a great pre-spawn bass area. Look for the creek channel that winds its way out of the northernmost part of the bay. The channel will be easier to see as the season progresses due to the heavy weed growth in this area. The channel will stay mainly clear due to the current. You will find that this channel is relatively deep and approximately 6 feet deep compared to the rest of this shallow bay. Fish will relate to this deep water safety and the nearby weeds for feeding. Look for and target weed edges, especially near the creek channel. Try jerkbaits, rattle traps. After water reaches 60 degrees, try buzzbaits. East side of the bay, you'll find deeper water close to shore and more weed beds. Fish will relate to the edge of the weed beds, but try a few casts over the top of the weeds as well. The fish will sometimes hide in these pockets. This is an ideal spot to try a worm or tube to punch into holes amongst the weeds. Look for isolated pads on edges of larger pad fields. Actively feeding fish will use these as ambush points. Don't be afraid to throw deep into the pads and rip your baits through the pads if it gets hung up. This will sometimes trigger fish into striking. Just east of and across from Haycock Ramp, you will find one of the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission's fish habitat improvements found on this lake. In past years, they would simply cut down shoreline trees into the water and cable and secure them to the shoreline. Now, with these new habitats, they have driven pilings deep into the lake bottom and over time become a fish-attractive piece of structure. Take note of the horizontal pilings that seem to really attract the fish. This is an obvious spot and will get lots of fishing pressure, but take your time. Fish the outside of the pilings first, then target the inner ones next, and don't forget to cast between the structure and the shoreline. One trick is to turn 180 degrees and fish the structure again from the other direction. Doing so can mean the difference between catching a fish and not. Best baits? Jigs. Creature baits. A Sanko worm that's rigged wacky style.